Hello, Takeout fans! This week we take another look at some great and some not so great puzzle games. For all the viewers that said that our last puzzle episode was too Game Boy centric, you got your wish. This time it's going to be all Game Gear. First up, Baku Baku Animals. Baku Baku Animals is a weird game. It plays very similarly to Puzzle Fighter 2, but instead of the gems used in the Puzzle Fighter games, this game uses strange animal-themed tiles. If you've played Puzzle Fighter, you know how this game works. Stack as many of the tiles together as possible, and then use what I'll call the detonator tile to get rid of them all. Pretty simple. The more you get rid of, the more gems you drop on your opponent's side. This game does the exact same thing, except that there are a lot more detonator tiles, and they're all themed. For instance, there are carrot tiles that have to be cleared with a rabbit detonator tile, bamboo tiles take the panda detonator tile to get rid of them, and so on. I'd say the biggest problem with this system is that the tiles aren't as easy to recognize as the simple color-only ones from Puzzle Fighter. A lot of times, I had trouble distinguishing quickly between the panda and the dog on the small screen. In a puzzle game, speed and accuracy are two of the most important parts of the game, and unfortunately, the weird tiles hindered both of these. Just like in Puzzle Fighter, you're always playing against someone. There is no mode where you can play alone, so if you don't like puzzle games that are competitive and fast, skip this one because there's no mode that just lets you sit back and think about your moves. Still, this game is pretty fun, and in 2-player mode, both players have the same disadvantages, so it's really not that bad. Either way, I'd say get Puzzle Fighter 2 for the GBA instead. It's newer, prettier, and a more refined version of the same thing. Plus, it's probably a lot easier to find. Next up is a game you've probably all played at one point or another. Columns. Columns was basically billed as the Game Gear's answer to Tetris. But honestly, it couldn't live up to that. Tetris is one of the simplest and most fun game concepts out there. There have been about 1 million versions of it on every system, so it's definitely a tough act to follow. Back in the day, I used to like Columns, but really, it's not that great in hindsight. The basic premise is to get 3 or more gems of the same type in a row in any direction. The problem is the game gives you shapes made of 3 gems, so you always end up with at least 1 left over. Once enough of those leftover gems build up, one of 2 things happens. Either A, they stack up to the top and you lose, or B, you accidentally set off a massive chain reaction that had nothing to do with you, and you win. It's not very strategic, and basically makes the game involve a lot of luck. Another thing I don't really like about Columns is the music. It's okay, but I bet not one of you remembers it 5 minutes after this review. Puzzle games need great music to stay interesting. I think both Tetris and Dr. Mario did a much better job of this at the exact same time. To call Columns anything but a Tetris clone would be silly. Everything about this game is patterned off of Tetris, but unfortunately they missed the one thing that really made Tetris great: the rock-solid puzzle game mechanics. Really, the only thing that I think is fun or innovative in this game is the flash mode, where you try to work your way down to one flashing tile, ignoring everything else. This is the best mode in the game, but unfortunately, the mechanics of the game still get in the way. Still, I'd like to see this mode in a more modern game like Puyo Pop or something. I think a lot of these problems have been addressed in the GBA remake of Columns called Columns Crown, but I'll have to save that for another day. As it stands, Columns was an okay pack-in game for the Game Gear, but it's really not that great a puzzle game compared to the others that came before and after it, and it obviously didn't do for the Game Gear what Tetris did for the Game Boy. If you loved Columns as a kid, don't play it again. Keep the good memories. If you never played Columns, skip it. There are far better puzzle games out there. Now let's move on to something different. Bust-A-Move. Bust-A-Move is a long-running puzzle series using the Bubble Bobble settings and characters. It's been released on nearly every platform imaginable, but since this is the Game Gear show, I'm going to review that version of the game. If you've never played the game before, the basic idea is to shoot light-colored balls together to knock them down from the ceiling. The goal is to eliminate all the balls from the ceiling as quickly as possible. To make this harder, the ceiling moves down about every 15 to 20 seconds. If any of the balls pass the line at the bottom, you lose. Bust-A-Move is a great game for portables because you can play it for 10 minutes and then just turn it off and not have to worry about it again. It's fast fun, and it has that easy-to-learn, tough-to-master thing going for it. The Game Gear version of the game is basically the same as all the others. My only real gripe is that the gun thing that you shoot with is a little slow to reload and show you the next color. Other than that, it's a great portable version of the game. It has the memorable music, and it even has the voice samples that tell you to start the round. The game was basically designed with portables in mind, so the conversion hasn't hurt it much at all. The Bubble Bobble characters are cute as ever, and the puzzles are easy to see and navigate. The game has a 2-player mode, but unfortunately I was only able to test it against the computer. It works similarly to the single-player game, except that when the other player does well, different colored balls fly up onto your side of the screen, and vice versa. Other than that, it's just like the single-player game, except it doesn't end until one person loses. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty great version of the game. The only reason you might try a different one is because it might be easier to find. If you have a Game Gear and like puzzle games, I suggest you check this one out. It's simple fun that anyone can enjoy. Last up, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Just like Bust-A-Move, this game has also been on many systems, but you may not have realized it because the game goes by many different names. The little slimes from the game initially came from an RPG called, well, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, so just read it for yourself. The puzzle game Puyo Puyo was based on that slime. I guess publishers felt that the game was too Japanese for Americans, so they changed the name and the license to be more American-friendly. Nintendo made the game into Kirby's Avalanche, and Sega decided to call it Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Sega later changed it back to be closer to the original by naming it Puyo Pop. Even Disney got in on the action with Timon and Pumbaa's Bug Drop for the Mac and PC. But that's enough history. All you really want to know is if this version of the game is any good. Well, I'm happy to say that it is. If you've never played this one, it's a bit more complicated to explain. Basically, you need to get 4 or more of the same color in a row to clear them, but they can be in any order as long as they're all touching. Since each piece is a little slime, like colors bond together. The real challenge is trying to set up big combos with different colors so you can drop more stuff on your opponent. It can be a bit hard to get the hang of, but once you do, it's one of the most addicting puzzle games out there. It's a pretty simple game, so not much was lost except some of the color detail in the conversion to the Game Gear. Other than that, the game plays exactly the same as the other versions. The DS and GBA versions have more modes that can be played with more players with only one cart, but that kind of stuff was way beyond this game's time. For a Game Gear game, it's definitely one to check out. It has all the gameplay of the older Puyo games, packed into one small screen. As an extra thing, I also really like the presentation of the puzzle levels, how they were in little notebook pages. This game shows a lot of polish and is one of the best puzzle games on the Game Gear. Be sure to at least check out some version of this game, because if you haven't played it, you're missing out. Well, that's it for this week's show. If you'd like to see more episodes, both new and old, you can check them out over at videogametakeout.com or just Google Video Game Takeout. New episodes come out every Monday, so be sure to check back with us. If you have any game suggestions, viewer art, or you just want to say hello, you can email me at videogametakeout@gmail.com. A big thanks to all the people who made viewer art for this episode. I'm really looking forward to getting you guys more involved with the show. So until next week, I'm Ben, thanks for watching, and have a great week.